This Torah class is brought to you by TorahAnytime.com.
Okay, welcome everyone. We have the zchus to be by the Admas Kodesh of the kever of Rabbi Yosef Eliyahu bar Eliezer Kloinimus Henkin, Rav Henkin. You know, Rav Moshe first published his first tshuva in 1959. Rav Henkin at that time was already 80 years old. So before Rav Moshe, Rav Henkin was the preeminent posek really in America. He was born in 1881 in White Russia in Belarus. He learned by Rav Zalman Meltzer. He learned in the Slutsker Yeshiva. He had smicha from Rav Zalman. He had smicha from the Ridvaz. One of the classic Perushim on Yushalmi is the Ridvaz. The Ridvaz is Reb Yaakov David Wolowski, who later, by the way, lived in Chicago. But you look on the side of the Yushalmi is Ridvaz, so Rav Henkin had smicha from the Ridvaz, although we're going to speak out in the second volume of Shalsut Shuvas B'nai Banim from Rav Henkin's grandson. Rav Henkin had a grandson, Rabbi Yehuda Herzl Henkin. He writes memoirs about his Zayda that he heard, and he says one of the things Rav Henkin said is he did not receive smicha directly from the Ridvaz because the Ridvaz was very busy, so the Ridvaz's son-in-law gave Rav Henkin the official smicha. He had smicha from Rav Baruch Bar Leibowitz. He had smicha from the Aruch HaShulchan. But when Rav Henkin was asked, did you have smicha from the Aruch HaShulchan, Rav Henkin said, I don't remember, but he didn't deny it. Okay, he was a Rav in a number of Russian towns. He came to America in 1922, where he was a Rav in a shul. But in 1925, he became the Menahel of Ezras Torah. Ezras Torah is, of course, one of the longest-standing organizations in America that support poor Talmidei Chachamim, and it was extremely active in the war years, especially World War II, when many Talmidei Chachamim were smuggled out, either before the war, during the war, after the war, and they mamish had no money. Rav Henkin, the Leiv and Nefesh was moiser to Ezras Torah. Very interesting. Ezras Torah, of course, publishes the calendar. Minhag in America by non-Hasidic shuls is to follow Rav Henkin's luach. It's mamish an established minhag in America, if we could say such a thing. If we could say there's something called Minhag America is to follow the psakim of Rav Henkin in terms of Beis HaKnesses management. Yes tachna, no tachna, navarachamim, and all those types of things were established by Rav Henkin. Some of his famous psakim is, as opposed to in the yeshivas, Rav Henkin held that you're not allowed to make kiddush on Rosh Hashanah before Tkiyah Shofar. In almost all the yeshivas today, they make kiddush before, because the davening is very long and it's hard for people to be mechavein. Rav Henkin held you're not allowed to make kiddush before Tkiyah Shofar. Another psak of Rav Henkin, which he disagreed with Rav Moshe, if a store owner sells his chametz, but continues to operate his business on Pesach, Rav Henkin held that it's not a good mechira. It's mevatel the mechira. You can't sell your chametz and then sell the chametz to others. Rav Moshe held it was still a good mechira. Just to speak out some of the memoirs of Shalsut Shuvas B'nai Banim, first of all, he writes in Ois Aleph that when Rav Henkin was 3 years old, he already knew a great portion of Tanakh. When he was 16, he was tested by Rav Zalman Meltzer, and the way the test went was Rav Zalman Meltzer tested him on Erevin. Rav Zalman Meltzer would say, "Nu Daf Beis," and he would have to say the names of all the Tanoim and Amoraim mentioned on Daf Beis and everything they say. And then to Daf Gimel, and then to Daf Dal, and then to Daf Hey. And Rav Zalman was really nishtoimim that at 16 years old, Rav Henkin had a very broad yediyah in Masechta Erevin. When Rav Baruch Bar gave Rav Henkin smicha, it took many days to go through the Yeridea, and then finally when Rav Baruch Bar gave the smicha, he gave it with great simcha, Rav Baruch Bar said. Rav Henkin was very machshav the Aruch HaShulchan. Rav Henkin held the halacha is always like the Aruch HaShulchan. He held that the Aruch HaShulchan was the greatest of all the achronim. Rav Henkin also said that the Aruch HaShulchan would, like Agavorcha, was able to say blad and Masechta Shabbos Baal Peh, just like, Mesiach Lefi Tumai. Okay, a few interesting things. They asked Rav Henkin, so who do you belong to? Do you belong to the Aguda or do you belong to Mizrahi? So Rav Henkin said they're both kosher, but I don't belong to either. I'm a Jew. He says, what's a Jew? A Jew is a Jew. A Jew is someone who learns Chumash, Gemara, and is alive. That's what we mentioned in the car. They asked Rav Henkin about Hallel on Yom HaAtzmaut. Henkin said, you don't say it. Not with a bracha, not without a bracha. So he said, should you be moicha against those who say it with a bracha? So don't be moicha. They told Rav Henkin once, today's Yom Yerushalayim. Today they freed Jerusalem from the from the Arabs, from the Goyim. So he said, okay, but now who's going to free Jerusalem from the secular Jews? When are we going to have a Yom Yerushalayim to free Yerushalayim from the Chofshiyim? They once asked Rav Henkin, how do you become a Gadol? How do you become an Adam Gadol? He said, very simple. First thing you have to do is you have to become an Adam Katan. And after you become an Adam Katan, then you could rise up to the Madriga of becoming an Adam Gadol. One time Rav Henkin got a phone call. He asked for a bracha on the phone. The person asked for a bracha on the phone. So Rav Henkin gave a bracha and he laughed afterwards. He says, the Gemara says, brachos einon ma'akvos. They're not important anyway. They don't do anything anyway. If we could just say one thing, which my understanding is that Rav Henkin asked that this halacha be said at his levaya. It was in his tava. And that is, Rav Henkin says, what is the role of a shliach tzibur? In Meikar Hadin, the role of a shliach tzibur is to be moitzi, someone who's not a baki, right? But he says, Bizman hazeh, everyone's a baki. So it used to be, and they still do this by the Sfardim, the shliach tzibur says the entire bracha out loud. In case there's an Einoi Baki. But Bizman Hazeh, at the very least, it's the obligation of the Shliach Tzibur to say the beginning of the bracha out loud, the end of the bracha out loud, and parts of the middle out loud. And if a Shliach Tzibur doesn't do that, it's not considered davening with a minyan. In other words, it's only considered davening with a minyan if the Shliach Tzibur acts as the representative, where he's starting and ending the bracha and saying certain things out loud. And therefore, says Rav Henkin, it is a very big mistake if someone davens for the Amud and they say, Baruch Ato Hashem, and they don't say Gal Yisrael out loud. Because if you don't say it out loud, it's not considered davening with a minyan. Oh, but what do? Do you answer Amen? Do you not answer Amen? So you could say it a little quieter. But it must be loud enough and audible for everyone to hear. If people don't hear it, you had a very nice morning, but you are not Mekayim Tefillah B'tzibur. And Rav Henkin asked that this should be said over at his levaya. So at least we have the schus to say it over B'Makam Menuchasai. So thank you everyone for joining us today. And may all of our tefillos be neskabel, Barachim of Ratzain.
You've just experienced another Torah class brought to you by TorahAnytime.com.